Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished panel, it's a pleasure to be back here in Sardinia, in Cagliari, with friends, and it's a pleasure to be with this distinguished panel who are first friends, partners, and we've been working together for the same aim. Before starting my 60-minute intervention, let me just take over from what my predecessor was mentioning, and I would call upon another element which includes also the knowledge base. 80% of the world deserts are in the Arab world, whether we're talking about North Africa, the Greater Sahara, or the Arab Peninsula. And this means that renewable energy, if we look seriously at them, if we move this 20% solar panels established within the EU, the same panel can produce double and triple the amount of electricity if just moved south. And that's why our different projects with the EU in that direction are of utmost importance, and the most important, since we're involved in the ones we have with Anakati and CBC MP, we have a huge number of projects trying to sell these concepts, especially that in the south, we do not look at the light energy of the sun, we look at the thermal energy, which is 10 times stronger, cheaper, and more effective. Now let me come to the aim of what I'm supposed to be mentioning. I'm not talking as Egyptian. Since 1994, I stopped talking wearing my national hat, and I started talking as a citizen of the Mediterranean. I'm speaking on behalf of the 500 chambers, the 20 million member companies within the Mediterranean region. And north or south, our problem is the same, job creation. And this is what's creating all our other social and economic problems. And I think if we focus on job creation, this would solve everything, whether we're talking about the first session, the terrorism and so forth, or fundamentalism that we'll be hearing in the coming sessions. But how can we create jobs? If we listen to all experts, especially my dear friend, Mr. Henry Malloz, he will say SMEs. We have to support SMEs. It's the job creator, it's the engine of growth. Yes, but SMEs have always been ignored for decades, north and south. I'm not talking about our part of the world only. They're uninformed of what we claim is created for SMEs, especially funding. And even if they're informed, it's inaccessible for them. And they're burdened with all the procedures and regulations that exists. And then we complain that we have informal sector eroding 50% of the GDP. And to all of them, survival is the name of the game. We do every 2 years a survey of about 120,000 companies and about around 500 chambers, federations, and multiplier organizations. And just a quick glimpse of what is the opinion of the business community, of the private sector, of the taxpayers, of the ones who actually are making politicians exist, as well as civil servants, because through their taxes, their salaries are being paid. One of the elements, which was theoretically the title of what I'm saying today, is moving from Euro-Med to Euro-Arab. We cannot keep imposing political elements that Barcelona were born upon and ignore the main element of merging the Mediterranean southern rim, which are mostly Arab countries, with the GCC and Iraq. Lots of other elements that were requested, I won't go through them in details. However, I cannot blame governments. Governments, unfortunately, have been inheriting decades of problems. Today, they're talking, and more important, listening to private sector and civil society, which is a huge change. We're seeing more and more public-private partnerships and more multi-stakeholder bottom-up approaches and more scientific, realistic, and doable strategies. Historically, we used to say wonderful agendas that everybody knew could never be implemented. Neither we had the resources, nor even the interest and the will to do them. Today, we're downsizing our dreams to the reality of what we're living in. And we're trying as much as possible to adapt best practices and reforming at all fronts, which is the slowest part of the game, because you have to deal, unfortunately, with the civil part of the governments, which I won't say unqualified, but needs capacity building. So the legal framework is there, the political will is there, and against what has been mentioned by lots of previous speakers, the financial instruments are there. We do a survey annually, MedAlliance. You can find it on the website of the conference. I'll leave it to them. 22 billion euros of grants, soft loans, and technical assistance are available for the Mediterranean SMEs, and this is availed from Mexican aid, USAID, passing through all EU and member state instruments, to multilaterals, to Japanese, ending up with KEXIM and Australian aid. The money is there, but the problem is the access to finance is the key problem. I remember when I was in Deauville, second meeting, and you know, the auction was going on. It started 22 billion, then it jumped up to I don't know what, and it ended up with 74 billion, if I remember the figures correctly. So I asked one of the heads of the IFIs, how come you're putting this money? They said, you don't have the capacity to download it. You cannot prepare the project dossiers. So we give you grants to prepare project dossiers to the amount of money we intend to give you. But we can announce any figure we want, go and get it. You can't. And this is the reality of the story. It's access to finance for countries, access to finance for SMEs. We're no different. So what do we need? Do we need to have a stake in what's going on, which is raw funding or processed services, or ready to serve as technical assistance? Or we just need a piece of the piece we need to just work and operate? There is one of the most wonderful programs of the EU, which is the twinning. We fought for years and years. In the end, we had President Barroso at that time saying that neighborhood countries have all rights of accession except accession. We don't want accession, we're not interested in it. But all the accession instruments are very important. The grasshopping propagating cross-border cooperation system that new member states, after learning the game, become the border of new accession countries and gets on moving, we are demanding, and I hope this comes as one of the recommendations, that our successful cross-border cooperation propagates to include Gulf countries. And this way, we can really start integrating. I won't touch upon education, training, and skills, because unfortunately, we have to admit our system of education does not produce what the market needs and what the market demands. But what's more important is, don't give me fish, teach me how to fish. Access to the huge EU internal market. That's one way of supporting job creation and socio-economic development. We are not competitors. We can complement each other in that direction. And the existing FTAs, unfortunately, the biggest mistake of Barcelona is it dealt between the EU and every southern Mediterranean country independently. It did not look at the start at integrating the South-South dimension. It came later, almost a decade later, with Agadir, when we started waking up and finding that we will never have our 2010 FTA. We're now 2014, and we still don't have the FTA. Innovation was mentioned by previous speakers, and we're part of the Agenda 2020, but it's demand-driven. And unlike its predecessor, there is no quota for the Mediterranean. And again, we're demanding having a quota for the Mediterranean because we don't have the capacities to compete with other regions. The same applies to our business associations. They need capacity building to be able to do their job of serving the economy and improving it and getting it forwards. So in simple, semi-complicated terms, what do we need to do? We need to have what we call Med-Globe adaptation, which simply opening all doors, supporting potential with the transparency, and admitting that there are some sectors we have to kill, especially the hopeless ones, and modernizing at all fronts. Another element, which is regional co-opetition. We need to cooperate and compete in the same time. Third country cooperation, working together for other regional markets like Africa, like different demanding markets where we can have transparent coordination, we can have comprehensiveness through complementarity, competitiveness through cooperation, and act as a single force targeting the whole world. And reviving the 2010 FTA, that's our future. And this can be achieved except with the deep and comprehensive free trade agreement that unfortunately is moving very slowly, especially at the services front. And fighting for a maximum regional component of the MPI and its successors, we cannot keep on working on bilateral islands, ignoring that our region is one unit. Programs such as MP, CBC, Euromed Invest, this is the future, this is what will get us all together to be able to deliver what is needed from our youth and our children. And availing information, simplifying what's going on. And very important, governments have to switch to the highly needed regulator instead of being the inefficient operator, and civil society, especially private sector, should become the efficient operator instead of being the present spectator of what's happening within the region. We need to create attractive markets, speed up the Euromed FTA and merge it with PAFTA, the Pan-Arab Free Trade Agreement. It's so stupid that we are developing rules of origin for the Arab Free Trade Agreement, where we have the Euromed Free Trade Origin that we're operating with the EU, who is between 30 to 50% trade partner, 40% investment partner, 50% tourism partner. So we're joking on reinventing the wheel where we don't have even the know-how or the capacity. We have to merge them together. Trade routes, if you look at the map, you'll find the trade routes that links the EU is the one that created the single market. Unfortunately, we don't have them between the South countries, not to mention between Arab countries in the Gulf and in the Mediterranean. We have to harmonize our standards. It's, again, ridiculous that I'm importing and exporting to the EU as every single Mediterranean and Gulf Arab country, yet we're using different standards and different specifications, and even innovating to come up with newer ones that nobody ever heard about in the world and will never use. We need to increase what we're doing today: awareness, openness, transparency, discussing openly what we have as problems and trying to avail all the available tools and instruments, especially the horizontal programs, and again, integrating the GCC and Iraq into the game. Adapt successful instruments used by the EU for accession countries. We are permitted to use them, yet we're not trained to get them. And here is the name of the game. How can we really access CEEBA, TAIEX, twinning, all these wonderful instruments that helped accession countries to benchmark quickly with the EU? They're available for us, unfortunately, yes. But there's a big difference between being put on the table and knowing how to order or read the menu. And enlarge, again, MPCBC and Euromed Invest to include the southern, the eastern rim of the Arab countries, Iraq and GCC, and increase all our rules of origin and FDI attraction tools to create jobs, both north and south. Last, let me close quoting parts of our ancient Egyptian heritage. Rig your boat, travel near and far, look for a wise partner, seek his knowledge, invite him in your home. This is how your people will prosper. And this was said by King Amenhotep almost 5,000 years ago to the head of his commercial fleet, the first to ever cross the Mediterranean to what's known today as the European Union. We're crossing the Mediterranean, stretching our hands, welcoming you in our home for a better Euro-Mediterranean region. Thank you very much.